Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where executive coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, leaders. It's Alicia Cowan. Welcome to episode number 7. Today, we are going to dive in and talk about time and how to use your time as an executive. I want to talk about a personal note first. I think, as I always do, I start these off with what's going on for me personally. And I think it's definitely relevant to the topic we're going to talk about. And I know you all are feeling this too. So as we continue this series, we've been talking about how to best manage yourself as a leader and as an executive. And I think how you use your time is such a big and important part of being a great leader. And we'll dive into that here in this episode for sure. On a personal note, time has definitely been on my mind just because we've had a lot going on in the Cowan household, as I know all of you do too. But we kicked off competitive cheer season here this spring. Our youngest daughter is 12 and a competitive cheerleader. She's turning 13 this coming weekend. And so cheer season is serious. There is a lot of competitions and a lot of travel involved. And so we are just coming off of a weekend in Atlanta. And I was able to meet my coach while I was there, live and in person. So we typically coach virtually, but we got a chance to meet up face to face and have a great dinner together. So that was a lot of fun. And recently, my in-laws have moved to the area, and yeah, there's just been a lot happening here around Wesley Chapel for us. But I think a lot about that, and I've been thinking a lot about how to best utilize time and how do we best quote unquote time manage. And so what I want to do in this episode is talk a lot about time and how we use it as a leader, and whether it's personal or professional. Really, as an executive, sometimes there's not exactly the clearest and bright lines between those two, personal and professional time usage. And so I want to talk a little about some of the learnings that I've had, both through my own personal experience and through coaching you as leaders. And so I'm going to talk about some things that I picked up along the way and a couple of resources that I've used. But I want to start off with the first one. And when we're talking about time, one thing I've learned about time management is that there's no such thing as time management. And what I learned from that was that there is this construct of time that we as humans really kind of made up, right? And then we started thinking about like time management and how to best like manage time. And if you think about it, that kind of blew my mind because we've heard of it through so many, corporate structures, right? How to best manage your time, right? If you Google time management right now, there's probably a million different things, articles and pieces of advice and things like that about how best you manage your time. When I heard somebody say this concept, and forgive me, I don't know, I forget the source where I originally heard it, but they said like, there's no such thing as time management. Time is just a construct, and we all have the same amount of time, and you can't control it, right? You can't force it. And that, to me, I don't know why, again, whoever said it that time in my life just kind of like resonated with me, like, oh shit. There's no really way to manage time, right? And I don't know why, again, it's very obvious, I'm sure, to a lot of people, but to me, the time really like resonated. So then why are we even talking about this? Well, number 2, what I also learned was really understanding that how do you use your time by knowing what you want to spend your time on. And so knowing it's not a guarantee how much time we're given on this earth, and knowing that we can't necessarily harness it and manage it. How do you want to spend your time? And so it doesn't mean necessarily just throw caution and throw everything to the wind and just kind of like be at the mercy of how anybody else wants you to utilize your time and manage your schedule, but you really get to decide. And one thing that I love for this, in a book that I reference all the time, is The One Thing. So again, I'll put it in the show notes for you, but I love this book and the website and all of the free resources that they provide, because what's awesome about it is because it discusses the different areas of your life, and it allows you to kind of like do like an audit, right? So different areas, again, both personal, professional, everything, right? Spiritual health, your finances, everything, and decide on one thing, and then not just picking from all those things is one thing to focus on, but from each of those different areas that are important to you, one thing that's going to make a difference in that particular area of your life. And then really understanding what are your long-term goals in that. And I know I recorded an earlier episode this year about planning and long-term goals. But I love this book because it talks about that and those different areas of your life and how you want to spend your time within those different priorities. And then the technique of breaking those longer term goals into smaller chunks and then really calendarizing them. And so I'm a very like process oriented and minded individual. And so for me, that structure and that thought process of like thinking about what I really want to do, how I want to prioritize my time, and then structuring it in such a way that it shows up on my calendar in my habits and what I do every day really just went a long way with me. And so I love this book and I love the philosophy that it teaches you on this. So a third thing that I've learned about getting things done, time management, if you will, is that lists are great. If you're a list person and you are the type of person like loves to check things off lists and write lists, great. Like lists are amazing. And why I think they're so helpful is one thing I learned about the brain is not a repository. So it doesn't do a really good job of just like holding and storing information that we need to think of for our list later. It's actually a problem solver. So a lot of times if we put something that it needs to go on our to-do list, we put it in our brain, we're like, okay, remember this for later. It usually is spinning around trying to solve it as a problem. And the more time it like dwells on that and spins on it rather than getting it on the list, obviously we're not using that brain power for something else. And so I'm someone that does this. Like I'm the person that does wake up in the middle of the night or is driving or thinks of something. I'm in the shower, whatever. So I keep things all over the place about like where I keep lists. So the reminders app on my phone has got like a to-do list on it. I have like little post-its and I'll write things down. And so the again, not having all these things in all these different spots, not necessarily the best idea, but tell you what we do with them in the next step. But the idea of getting these things out of your brain and not holding them in your brain, super, super helpful when you have a lot going on. And if you're like me and you have, again, family, kids, pets, all the things that are like swirling around into your brain, work, right? The job, all the things, the meetings, everything. It's really helpful to get all those things out onto a piece of paper and not have to worry that you're going to forget. So put them somewhere safe, basically, where you can reference them later and your brain doesn't sit and spin on trying to solve them as a problem. Okay, so while I say that lists are great, also lists are not great when you're looking at your calendar and trying to decide, what do I do next? Okay, so lists are great, but you have to throw away the list in order to best make use of your time. So technique I've learned when I went through, again, my coach training and within my school of coaching, they have a technique that they taught us called Monday Hour One. And this method is where you would take this list, right? So you have this list and I have a designated time. I do it on Sunday evenings, but basically the concept is if you had Monday Hour One, it'd be like the first hour of your week or your day. And you would take this list and it has everything consolidated into one list. So again, whether it be personal stuff, short-term goals, long-term goals, work stuff, it's all culminated on this one list. Okay. So taking that list and then, as I was saying earlier, prioritizing it. So going through the list and deciding what is most important. How do I rank it? Is there anything that's just not important that I can delete and say no to? What can I delegate or shift to someone else? What can I have somebody else do for me? And then taking that list and calendarizing it. So after you rank everything and you decide what to eliminate or dish out, then you actually physically put it on your calendar and then take that list and check it. Okay. So again, this is how this relates back to time, because again, if you have the highest priorities and the things that you really, really want to do, and you actually, again, can see them show up on your week rather than your week just defaulting to meetings that other people put on your calendar or requests or things that pop up. You can see how when you do that and honor that, it can help you get your most highest, best use out of time out of your week. So that's a quick snippet of really how it's a couple techniques of how I've utilized my time in the best way possible. And I will say this, Another thing that I've learned about this whole process is that there's no one set perfect week where everything goes according to plan. So having a little bit of flex time and having a little bit of overflow time where you can fit into some of those things that just pop up unexpectedly, and planning for the unexpected has really been helpful for me, because inevitably something's going to come up that you didn't necessarily plan for and that wasn't on the list and wasn't like perfectly executed. So just having a little bit of grace and a little bit of overflow time with the schedule really, really, really helps out. Okay, so a couple more things I'm going to talk about. We've talked about prioritization and lists and all of that, and making sure that everything's calendarized. But one thing we didn't really address, and one thing I'm working on this year, is planning time for yourself and family time, personal time first. So a lot of times what we do is we look at what is on our work schedule, or what work we have first, and what meetings are on the schedule, or like what kids' activities, and getting all of that calendarized. And a lot of times we forget just to plot some time for downtime or self-care, things, like working out, even just having some mental health space, right? Even just to like kind of just decompress and relax. And I've been doing a better job about planning out fun time and vacations and time off, and just fun time for fun. And so planning time for yourself, and again, doesn't mean that this is above all of the other things, but it just means that you are putting yourself on your calendar as a priority as well. So that's one thing for 2023, and trying to take exquisite care of myself and personal time and family time as a priority. So working on that one too. All right. So I also want to talk a little bit about burnout. One thing I learned again through my years of coaching and working with others is that it's fascinating to me that as executives, like, there is typically a high level of work ethic and work capacity that leaders have, right? So they typically exhibit like really, really high intensity and focus when they're doing something they're passionate about and that they love. They can work for long hours, long periods of time with deep focus. And what I noticed is that burnout, and again, I don't want to say this and for everybody, this is my experience, is that when we keep adding things that we don't necessarily want to do, or we're not passionate about, or that's not necessarily fueling us, that we feel burdened by things that we think that we have to do, or we keep adding, and we are not saying no to things. We're not releasing things. We're not letting things go. And we're not living in the space for a majority of the time that we're in our highest value add. I see that leaders experience that type of burnout when that is occurring. And I think at times, again, this balance, right, of having this leader that has a really high capacity for work, really high capacity for long hour workload, right, because they're passionate about something, can really get into what some people call flow, but at the same time experience burnout. Really, it's a matter of looking at auditing and like trying to figure out, okay, what area of your life are you feeling like burdened by and burnt out by, and what is it that you're not doing, or what are you doing too much of, in order to decide, again, how do we reprioritize? And I think what happens is we ascend to different levels of leadership, or we take on new life challenges, or like personal things that are happening in our life. We don't necessarily always like recognize when there is a time that's needed to pause and readjust. I think I'm very guilty of this. I have lots of different things that I get like ebb and flow in terms of what's happening in personal life and how it's going, how that balances with work and business. And I don't always necessarily give myself the right and appropriate amount of time to buffer, and say, let's just pause. When I say buffer, not necessarily meaning like don't do anything. It's just saying pause for a moment and kind of say, what do I need to reevaluate here? And what do I need to shift in terms of what I'm taking on? And really kind of moving that schedule around and allowing yourself to readjust as things come up. So I say that about burnout. Something that I've learned is that, again, I think leaders have a high capacity, but there's usually something where their time is getting pulled, and they're typically not readjusting accordingly when that happens. All right, so let's talk about another thing that I've learned that I want to encourage you as leaders to do. So one thing that I learned probably my, like, I think probably 30s, either the late 20s, early 30s, was I was traveling a lot for work. I was just purchased a new home and, had a lot going on. And I had a leader come to me and tell me, I was asking for some advice, and I was like, how do you do as much as you do? And I saw her as a leader with like a family and professional career. And she just leaned into me, and I thought she was going to give me some like wildly secretive tip, but she was just like, hire a housekeeper. So I had this like revelation where like I had gotten to the point where I could start to outsource and get some help. Now, again, I know this is not necessarily something that everybody has the capability to do. So I say that, which I know I am in a place of absolute privilege where I can do this now. But I think when, again, you're starting to get to the point where you're an executive and you have the means to be able to hire people to support you, at times there's a lot of guilt around that people feel guilty around, like being able to allow for someone to do some things for them, whether it be cleaning their house or making food or helping with kids or, I don't know, delivering dry cleaning. I mean, all the different things, delivering groceries, all of those things that it's a matter of trade-off. Would you rather be spending your time, or would you rather be spending your money on those things and doing them? And I say that because I think it's so important. We'll get to the other things that I think leaders don't necessarily always recognize is the time that they are spending potentially on doing some of those things rather than spending them with their family or with their teams, is a trade-off, an absolute trade-off. And so releasing the guilt and realizing that when you are in a place where you can hire people to help you, you are providing, again, income and employment to someone that can help, right? And you're providing that opportunity. Release the guilt, right? Release the guilt from it and allow people to help you in that way if that's something that you are in a position to do. Okay. So outsourcing. It's amazing. Another thing with time that I've realized, and again, I think this comes up to, again, like a lot of my, what I've learned through coaching and what I've been taught through some of the coaching sessions that I've had is honoring what's on our calendar. So I talked about it earlier of prioritizing, taking that list, putting it into the calendar. But what I've also known is that ultimately it is a game of mental management. Okay? So I go through this every single day where I've got something very like neatly, nicely, strategically planned on my calendar. And I know it aligns with my goals. I know this is something that I want to do. And ultimately, I don't want to do it in that moment. In that moment, my brain gives me super good reasons for not wanting to do it. My brain also sometimes acts like a toddler and throws a temper tantrum. Happened to me this morning. Again, coming off of a long trip, tired, physically tired, mentally tired. My brain offered me a million different reasons of not wanting to do the work. Okay. So it takes a lot of mental management to honor what's on the calendar. And so I tell you this because when we plan ahead, we've got these long-term goals and we've got them calendarized. Whatever comes up on our calendar, we look down at it, we're like, I don't want to do this. Okay. And know that that's, again, completely normal. Okay. The brain's going to offer really, really good reasons to want to just relax and chill. Okay. And again, I've talked about this in earlier podcasts. The emotional triad, again, avoid discomfort, stay comfortable, stay in the cave, stay on the couch, stay in bed, sleep in, you deserve it. You had a long weekend, you're tired, you probably just need to take a nap. Totally. All those things. Okay. So it's going to give you a lot of good reasons that sound really nice and that sound really like virtuous. But ultimately, again, when you can get to the point where you honor what's on the calendar, and again, I'm not saying push through like illness or push through against things that are a little more extreme. I'm just talking about this mental chatter that can come up as you're looking at that calendar and deciding what to do next. I say that is it takes mental management to just do it anyway. Okay. So no, and just recognize, like, I hear you. I hear what you're telling me. We're going to go ahead and get through this anyway. And then you get through it and get the thing done. do a little celebration. Okay. Celebrate after that you were able to get through the thing, and it can be as minor as major as you want. And over time, what you retrain your brain to do is to get dopamine hits from the completion of the task, honoring what you say you're going to do versus giving into this temper tantrum that is happening and occurring in your head. Okay. So rewiring the brain to go for that dopamine hit and get the completion, get the thing done. Okay. Because I offer you this, know that when this thing comes up, your brain won't want to do it. Okay. And that's perfectly normal. All right. So those are things I've learned. Those are things I've learned about again, not time management, but how to best utilize your time and things that are really helpful. Again, so really simple. No such thing. Time is just a construct, right? So no such thing as really managing the time, but you can know what's most important to you. So know your priorities and how you want to spend your time. Make lists, get things out of your head onto paper, but then take that list and put it on your calendar, right? Scrap the list, because when you get to the list, your brain's not going to want to prioritize or know what to do next, okay? Plan some time for yourself. Take exquisite care of yourself, leaders, because we need you to be healthy, happy, doing well, doing great so you can lead us in the workplace. Burnout. Burnout might be a sign that you need to take time to evaluate what's on your schedule and decide whether or not you are taking on things that you don't need to. Okay. Don't be afraid to outsource. Figure out there's something that you can do with your money to get back some time. Okay. And then mental management. I coach leaders on this all the time. Okay. So when things come up for you, when things are next up on your calendar and you hear your brain start to give you some chatter around like not wanting to do it, perfectly normal. Coach leaders on this and honoring their commitments, their goals, their time, all the time. So those are the tips. Those are kind of the things that I've learned. And again, I'll give you some resources that I have come to find helpful for me over time. And then I'll tell you this. As you are a leader and you're thinking through what do I do with my time and how do I best know that I'm using my time correctly? I'll say this. I think what I've heard too is that leaders don't always think about the things that is their highest and best value. So I'll tell you some things. One, strategic planning time. Okay. So if you're not blocking out some time to think about what's in the future for you, what does the future hold for your team, for your company, and you don't have that blocked. And again, this is not probably a weekly exercise. This may be like yearly, quarterly, every 6 months, but taking some time that you step away and think through what's next. Are we on the right path towards our long-term goals? Decision-making time. You make super important decisions regarding the company's direction and growth and profitability. Do you have time just to allow yourself to make some really big decisions that you need to make? Of course, managing and leading people. It takes so much time. And are you giving yourself time to do that? Financial management. You are overseeing the budget and forecasting, all that good stuff. So do you have time to properly look at those things? We don't always block time for innovation and problem solving. Relationship building, whether it be with our customers, suppliers, partners, stakeholders, all that, just blocking time for building that relationship. And of course, then last but not least, just your own continuous learning and development and growth. So again, are you blocking out time for your own learning and professional development opportunities? So I've given you a lot of food for thought. So if you need any help with that, I am so happy to help you evaluate what you have going on. I have plenty of experience help coaching leaders through evaluating what they're using their time on and how to best maybe reconfigure or restructure if they need to make some adjustments. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, okay? And if this resonates with you, please share it with somebody you know and love, or somebody that you're thinking of that might need some help with how to best use their time. All right. You know where to find me. It's Alicia Cowan Coaching. It's ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. You can schedule a consult with me and we can get started facing some of your toughest challenges as an executive and a leader. All right. Thanks for listening and talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.